I'm excited to show you Meander books because there's so many creative variations of what you can do with them. You can make very small books from A4 or 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, as you can see here. They're great for really graphic covers. You can make larger books from larger sheets of paper, like these art journals. And there's just so many creative variations of what you can make with them. For making your own art journal, you need two pieces of paper. One is a large sheet of drawing paper, Bristol paper, or watercolor paper. I'm going to use watercolor paper. And one piece of paper for the cover itself. That could be a decorated paper that you buy, could be a plain piece of paper, canson paper, colored paper, or a drawing watercolor or Bristol paper that we decorate. You can make covers from handmade paper, decorated paper, old shopping bags, paste paper, colored paper, wrapping paper, slow drawing, and maps. So, two pieces of paper to begin, one large sheet and one inside paper. The large sheet that I have here is roughly 20 inches by 28 inches, and that is 50 centimeters by 70 centimeters in metric. The large sheet of paper that we're using for the inside pages, first we want to figure out which direction the grain goes, because your books will be longer lasting and the folds will be a lot cleaner if the direction of the grain is parallel to the spine. Now, as a general rule, the grain direction generally goes in the long direction on commercial paper, but we need to check that because different manufacturers have different protocols. So one of the ways we can do that is you just curl over or flop over the piece of paper and just notice the shape it makes and how much resistance that there is when you press on it. So you can see that's really quite an open curve, and there's just a little bit of resistance there when you sort of bounce it, if that makes sense. Then you want to flip it around, turn it the other way, and see what that feels like. Now that has less resistance, just less bounce to it. And so it flops more easily in that direction. So that means that the grain direction is parallel to the long side. So do that yourself now with your paper and just check which way the grain direction goes. Okay, so you figured out which direction the grain goes, and we're going to start by folding the paper in half parallel to that grain direction. So curve your paper over, match the corners, and then hold the paper in the middle with one hand, in the middle of the length of it, and then with the other hand, take a fingertip, run it from the two open edges over to the fold, and crease the fold there, and then go up and down to crease in two different directions. Then I want you to go over that to have a really clean crease with what's called a bone folder. It's a very simple looking tool, but very, very useful. And that gives you a really nice crease. Now, if you don't have a bone folder, you can also use a teaspoon that's got rounded edges on it. You'll use this end for scoring, and you can use the bowl of the spoon. You can see, use the bowl of the spoon for creasing your papers. So over time, it is really useful to have a bone folder, but you don't need one. Then we're going to take one of those upper edges, curve the paper back towards you, back towards that fold, line up the edges of the paper, and then as before, hold that, run a fingertip over to the center of the crease of where it's curved over, run your finger up and down to crease it, use your bone folder, or the bowl of the spoon, run over that to crease the paper. Okay, now the paper from the end is that shape. You can see that. So you want to flip it over. And then again, take this top edge of paper, curve it over. Hold the two edges together, crease it from the center, up and down, go over it with your spoon or your bone folder, and just check how things are lining up. You may need to just adjust slightly. I will here. You can always sort of reline up the corners and just recheck. Now those line up really nicely at the edges. Because if you start with your folds lining up, it does help the whole book work better. So just take your time over the folds. That is a new skill to learn how to crease accurately, and it gets easier and easier as you go. Okay, unfold everything and just fold those the opposite direction so that it will lay flat. That will just make the next step easier. And you notice that the whole thing is a W shape at this point. So you want it nice and flat. And then we're going to fold it the other direction. So we folded it long ways, parallel to the grain. We're going to fold it over. And again, match the corners. Hold it. Now here, we're working against the grains. So what I'm going to do is just crease it. I've run my fingertip over there and creased it. But I'm actually going to score that fold so that it's going to fold a lot cleaner than it would otherwise. Okay, we do want this folded right in the middle. So you can measure it, or you can just fold it over and match the edges. So I'm going to do both just to show you what the process is. So if you want to measure that, make a little pencil mark, put your ruler out of the way, and then you can take a triangle or set square, line it up with your mark, hold that down, and make a line for you to follow. You can also just crease it in half and then see your crease mark and work with there. Some people want to work with rulers and measurement, and some people are more comfortable working visually. So then you line up your ruler with your line and hold your bone folder edge on, and you're scoring that line. I'm going to go over it a few times quite heavily. You're pressing down very heavily. I think you can hear that. And if you're using the spoon as your bone folder, you're going to use this edge. And do make sure that the spoon you have has a rounded edge, because you don't want to cut through the paper. So then you're running along it like that. Okay. So put the ruler out of the way. Okay, so now you've got that. And again, we'll curve that over. We'll match your corners. Go to the middle. And now you've got a nice creased fold there. Okay, so now we've divided the paper into 8. And we want to do 2 more folds here and here. So again, it's going to end up as a W shape to make each page. So our pages are going to be this size. Okay, so again, you can measure in half. Okay. And I'm actually going to measure the other page at the same time. Make your pencil mark. And when you're making pencil marks, you can use a very hard pencil like a 4H or 6H. I'm using a softer pencil that's dark so that you can see the lines, because it makes it easier for demonstration so that you can actually see what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm going to score these lines. And it's important to score the lines that are going across the grain because they will fold a lot more cleanly than they would otherwise. Okay, so we've got that. And we'll just check that that lines up where we want it to. Just a little bit of leeway to get this accurate. Okay, good. And then we want to do the same thing on the other side. So partially scored from before. We'll do this ourselves. Okay. Okay, so that's a W shape. Okay, now all the folds are done. We've got our piece of paper and it's folded into a W shape in both directions. We've got all the folds done that we need. Next, we need to plan where we're going to cut the piece of paper to make your text pages. So I've just been drawing lines to show you where you'll be cutting. And for each of them, you're going to be cutting between 1, 2, 3 panels and then stopping before the final panel. So here you're cutting up 3 panels to here. And then from this edge, you're cutting across 3 panels to here. Then from this edge, you're cutting across these 3 panels to here. So in each case, you're leaving 1 panel uncut. And the way to check if you've got it correct is you're going to be folding in an S pattern. So you're going to be folding around like this. So you want to see that there's one continuous shape where there's no lines across. You don't need to draw these lines, but it can just help to be clear before you begin your cutting. Okay. So make sure you've got a craft knife or an X-Acto, some sort of knife with a sharp blade. Having a sharp blade means you'll cut a lot more cleanly than if you've got a used blade that's not as sharp an edge. Okay, and so you want to line up the metal ruler and then hold the knife low in your hand. And you should be able to make that in one cut. And I cut just a tiny bit past that fold. Okay. I'm pressing down quite hard because I want to cut all the way through in one go if that's possible. You can take 2 or 3 passes with the knife if you're practicing cutting and this is new to you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, so all our cutting is done and you can see what this looks like. We've got 2 end sort of panels like that and then it's cut up the middle. So we're into a 4 strip Meander book and this is going to be our finished page size. Okay. So we'll start at one end and we're going to be folding, 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 folding all the way to get to the end. So I'll show you how to do that. So you're folding up, you're folding down, folding up, folding down, folding up, folding down, folding up. Here you have to fold differently. You never fold across what you've got. And then up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And there is your completed text pages. So I'll just do that again so that you can see that again, because it can be a little confusing at the beginning. So you can start at either end, and again, you're just going zigzag, zigzag, zig. You don't fold that way because there would be an extra thickness there getting in the way. So it's always page directly to page. Up, down, up, under. Okay, so there's your finished text block. And there are some regular concertina or leporello pages. There are zigzags. And there's a couple interesting pages in there that are folded across the bottom or the top. And we'll have some interesting things to do with that. So don't be concerned about that. Okay, and on this also, it's important that you end up with your pages so that they both hinge off one end of your text block. You can also make Meander books with more than 4 strips to them, and then you need to cut off one extra panel just because of the way the book works. You'd have one hinging off the top and one hinging off the bottom, and that doesn't work for attaching our cover. So then you need to cut off one panel so that it ends up with this sort of a profile. Okay, so there's your text block. And you can make that out of any paper you want. You can also join more than one together if you want really thick books. So this is a brilliant way of making a book from one large sheet of paper. And you can use any paper that you want, which means that you can get an art journal that has the paper that you most prefer to use to work on. Okay. Okay, we're going to make a cover out of the red piece of paper for your text block, and just to show you what the process is like with quite a heavy piece of paper. So we're making a cover that's going to wrap around. This is a cover, so it's going to have 2 sides that tuck in and top and bottom that tuck in as well. So I'll show you how to do that. And again, it can be a decorated paper, something you've bought, something you've made, or it can be a plain colored sheet of paper. Okay. So here we've got our piece of cover paper, we've got our text block, and our spine is in this direction. So I'm going to start by figuring out where it's going to fit on here. I'll just line it up with the lines on the cutting mat because it's easier to visualize there. Now, this piece of paper has got a few marks on it. I'm going to be doing some artwork or collage on top of it, so I'm really not worried about that. Okay. I'm going to make rough lines of where this is going to go. I don't want my lines too close. I want to leave a little extra room here, a couple millimeters, 1/8 of an inch on either side, because I want it to be easy to slide the text block into the cover. Okay, so I've made my rough lines. You can see them here. And I'm going to just go over them with my triangle or set square so that I know they're square. And since this is a heavy paper, I do need to score it before I fold it. So I'll just continue those lines. And if you're comfortable doing this by eye, you can also just do this by eye. That's okay too. Okay, so I'm going to line up my ruler with this line. Going to hold the bone folder and score that. And basically when you are scoring something, you're pressing all the fibers of the paper closer together. That makes it easier to make a clean crease. Okay. So, curve that over. best to use the bone folder at an angle. That's how it works best. And again. Okay, so we'll just check this. It's always good to check along the way. So here's your text block. This is the direction of the grain and the direction of the spine. And just looking at that, the height of what it's folded down to is just a little bit bigger than the height of the book. So that's perfect. And this is going to be wrapping around the book. And to start off with, I'm going to, let's see, I want to see roughly how wide that is. So it needs to be about there. Okay, so I'm going to take my set square and I'm going to make a score just around there. Pressing quite hard again. Now, I'm not exactly sure where to make this other crease because it's got to wrap around the covers and have the width of the spine in there as well. So I'm going to tuck this in so it's nice and snug in there. And then I'm going to make sure that's square. Yep, okay. Then I'm going to fold this around. You can see that. And just see where does this sit when it's folded around. Because I want to get this crease in the right place. I don't want a lot of extra and have the cover flapping around, but I also don't want it too tight. So I folded that around. I'm going to make a line there so you can see that. And I'll take this out. And I'll score this second mark. Okay. Now I can also just sort of check where the scores are going to be for the spine. And I can make a little mark. So you can see here I have 2 pencil marks for where the spine is going to be. And this is only needed when you've got a really heavy paper that's just not going to fold cleanly unless it's scored. So then it really is a good idea to score it first. And you put a nice clean crease on the spine of the book. Okay. All right. Okay, we're ready to put them together. So again, take your text block, fold the pages, front and back pages out, put them down so they're a bit like wings, and then we're going to stick one into this tab and one into that tab. It's a little bit tricky just to tuck it in there, and that depends on how tight your cover is as well. But you can see how it tucks in there. You can see that that's the shape of how it's folded. Press it down, wrap the covers all around, and then you want to just check that the creases are all nicely made and they sort of fit where they're supposed to. Sometimes you need a bit of adjustment, and you can see where your spine creases are. And then there you've got your completed book with the paper that you want inside, and it's an art journal that you've made all ready for you to dive in and add your work.